He was talking about a combat veteran.
All right, so
I was going to say, I know what they need out of the Book of Concord. You need a visual out of there, Pastor, where you do with the faith and then the faith, justification, sanctification, regeneration, all of those terms.
yep,
The order of it. Some
Yeah.
kind of a visual.
like an Ordo Salutis, yeah, Order of Salvation, yeah. We could do that. The problem is like a lot of them happen simultaneously.
Yeah, but still you could write,
Right.
I mean, that you could just kind of like tuck in there so that you can.
Oh, you mean like defining of terms, like a glossary?
Well, yeah, and it's in the back, but how they follow or how they work, because it's in this section, and it's in that section, and
Yep.
to tie them together.
Class of '63.
Oh, boy.
Extra magnifying.
All right, so
Yeah,
we finished last time on chapter 41. Joseph is exalted, and here he is a picture of Christ. You know, Christ was also sold by his brethren, not on account of his sins, but on account of his righteousness. And Jesus too suffered for doing what was right. And so we see here that so the years that we're looking for here about are let's see here. Joseph was sold into slavery in about 1899 BC. He served Potiphar for about a year, the baker and the cupbearer. While Joseph is freed from prison in about 1886. The years of plenty are 1885 to 1879 BC, and then the years of famine are 1878 to 1871. Okay, those are the years of famine.
18 what? 18?
1878 to 1871.
BC.
BC.
Going backwards, right?
BC goes backwards.
I was thinking the same.
So that gives you kind of a timeline of what's going on here. You can look up some of the pharaohs that would have been, around at that time. Let's see here, Jacob and Canaan. I'm not finding it, but I would be able to tell you.
Here's a pharaoh, Akhenaton, 1379 to 1362.
Oh, yeah, that's too late.
That's
That's way too late. That's the problem. If you watch like the Ten Commandments, see, this is one of the big arguments.
So is this wrong?
Let's see here. Oh.
See what it shows? See, it says when you start.
Oh, centuries later, Pharaoh Akhenaton. This was much, much later. So that's a different Pharaoh.
Okay.
He comes much later. He actually comes after the Exodus. And I think that he probably grew up in a time when, there was still memory of Yahweh, of the Lord. And that's why he associates him with the sun god, Aten, and establishes a monotheistic religion in Egypt for about the time of his reign. Afterward, you have the last of the Tutmosis dynasty, like Tutankhamun, who was the last in the line of the pharaohs that had been associated with like the Exodus. So the whole deal is that what happens? Why is there a pharaoh who doesn't know Joseph? Well, because during that time period, that 210 years that the Israelites are in the land of Egypt, well, what happens is that there's a breakdown politically in the kingdom. And you have an Asiatic people by the name of the Hyksos that invade. They start what is called the second intermediary period, okay, where they control northern Egypt. And the native Egyptians control southern Egypt. So what the native Egyptians do is they finally throw out the Hyksos, but the problem is that the Hyksos had Semitic names, like the Hebrews did. So it makes sense that these native Egyptians wouldn't have known Joseph, partly because they were from a different dynasty, and they would have feared the Israelites because they were like their enemies, the Hyksos, which is why they then enslave them and persecute them and try to limit their numbers. So, but most of the movies you watch, like Ten Commandments, wrong Pharaoh. They say it's Ramesses II. It's about 200 years too late. The Pharaoh that would have been who I believe is the Pharaoh of the Exodus is Amenhotep II. It makes sense with the genealogy, right? So the Pharaoh, the Pharaoh's daughter who finds Moses, I don't think she's just a princess. She's actually Princess Hatshepsut, and so she was actually ruler of Egypt. She co-reigned with Tutmosis III for like 17 years. Okay, and she was also reigning during her husband's reign as well. And so she was, which would have made Moses not only a very popular guy, but also a very powerful man because he's the son of the de facto ruler of Egypt. So why does Pharaoh want to kill him when he kills the Egyptian? Why isn't there protection? Well, if you look at the term, Tutmosis III reigns 57 years. Hatshepsut dies like 13 years into that, right? And so what do you have left? You have like 40 years, right? Well, that's the time that it takes for Moses to be in Midian before the Pharaoh dies, right? So this all like, are you following what I'm saying here? Is it making sense? So she would have died around the time that he killed that Egyptian. He no longer has the political protection that what he would have had. And the Pharaoh now wants to get rid of any rivals to the throne, you know. So, and you can actually go and look online and find statues of her, and I think she's even sometimes pictured as having like the Pharaoh's beard, you know. So it makes sense that, well, and Moses always knew who he was. I mean, his name is Hebrew for drawn out. He always knew who he was. So that's another thing that the movies get wrong, right? So, the Pharaoh that Moses flees from when he's 40 is Tutmosis III, who is known as the Napoleon of Egypt. He extended Egypt to its largest boundaries. And then Amenhotep II would have been the Pharaoh of the Exodus. He does a lot of building and that sort of stuff, but there are also a lot of problems during his reign. So it also kind of depends too what kind of, there's a little debate too about chronology, whether you use the high chronology or the low chronology. They're actually different dates. So some people say it's Tutmosis III, others say it's Amenhotep II, and there are arguments back and forth. But I think it's truly, you know. So yeah, my guess is Amenhotep II. So, but we're not to that part. That's far, far in the future from where we are now with Joseph, right? Joseph is now second in command in Egypt. He's had 2 sons. He's in his 30s, right, when he was raised to power and glory. And now they are in the famine, the years of famine. And this not only affects Egypt, but this also affects the surrounding countries of Canaan and the like. So, let's read 42 verses 1 through 5.
When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" He continued, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, for the famine was in the land of Canaan also.
All right, so here we see that Jacob and his sons don't really have a very good relationship with one another. Because, I mean, he's like, well, why are you looking at each other? Go and buy us some grain, right? And this is the 2nd year of the famine. So it shows that their food supplies are running pretty low. And as we know, 10 of the brothers go down. Jacob will not risk Benjamin, because Benjamin is the only son who he thinks is left of Rachel, his favorite wife. Now, Benjamin was probably about 24 years old at this time. Okay? So he's not a very young man in that way, right? Not how he's usually pictured as being, a child, right? All right, verses 6 through 11.
Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them, and said unto them, Ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And they said unto him, Nay, my lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. We are all one man's sons. We are true men. Thy servants are no spies.
All right, so here we see that Joseph's dream finally comes true. His brothers come and actually bow down to him, right? They come down and bow their faces to the ground. This fulfills what occurs in his first dream with the sheaves, right? And Benjamin will do the same later on. But he treats them like strangers and he speaks roughly to them. Why does he do this?
Just to test them.
Yes, it's not out of revenge, but it is to test them, to see if their hearts have changed. And he does this, and he speaks through an interpreter, so that way they won't recognize who he is. Remember, he was 17 years old when he was taken from his home, right? So he's changed quite a bit in the succeeding years. But not only that, he's also dressed like an Egyptian prince. He speaks Egyptian. He's using a translator. And no one would expect him to be, they think he's dead, right?
Or a slave.
Or a slave somewhere, right?
So that's why it was easy for him to know who his brothers were, but they didn't know him.
Right.
Because of that.
Well, and most of them were fully grown, and yeah, I mean, people do change a little bit, but not a lot, They might be a little more gray, but...
And how old was Joseph again here, about?
Oh, well, he was 30 when he was raised to power, so 37 for the 7 years of plenty, then 2 years, so he'd be about 39.
How old was he when they got rid of him?
17.
That's what I thought.
So, he recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. And he remembers the dreams that he dreamed of them, right? So God has finally delivered dominion and lordship to Joseph as he promised, right? Even though, oftentimes we get so impatient, right? We get so impatient for God to fulfill his promises to us. But look at how long, like, Abraham had to wait, and Joseph had to wait. I mean, he had to wait more than, almost half of his life, right? Before God actually fulfilled his promise to him, right? That God isn't slow to fulfill his promise because his time is not the same as our time. And so it's very important for us that we are patient, right? And trust that God is actually going to do what he promises to do. And that might take years, right? It might take decades. That's his business and not ours. So, we see here that he says that they are spies, that they have come to seek out the nakedness of the land. And what does that mean, the nakedness of the land?
Because of famine?
When you're naked, what are you? If you get charged, vulnerable, right? We call that, if you get caught by the police, indecent exposure, right? The nakedness here is when you're naked, you're vulnerable. You're open, right? And what he's saying here is, you guys are spies. You've come to seek out the vulnerabilities of the land in order to take advantage of it, to invade and take our grain. That's a pretty serious charge, right? Because that's what happens to spies.
They're usually
Killed.
Yeah, they're usually executed, right? Like the Rosenbergs, right? Wasn't that the big one back in the late 50s, early 60s?
Yep.
Right?
Oh, the brothers, yeah.
So, yeah, it was a man and a wife that...
Yeah, I read about the son, yeah.
Sold stuff to the Soviets.
Right. And so here they're trying to reassure him, saying, no, we're all the sons of one man. We're honest men, right? Your servants have never been spies. Verses 12 through 17. He said to them, know it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see. And they said, we, your servants, are 12 brothers, the son of one man in the land of Canaan. Behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. So they're trying to convince him here that, no, we're telling the truth. This is our backstory. This is who we are. But Joseph said to them, it is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Now, why do you think that's the test?
See if he's alive or not.
Right, to see if Benjamin is alive or not, and because Benjamin is his only
Brother.
full-blood brother, right? He wants to see his brother.
And he knows they're honest, even though they say they are.
Well, that's what he's trying to figure out, if they actually are honest or not, right? And if if thoughts of revenge and pride and covetousness still rule their hearts, or if the succeeding decades have actually changed them or not. And so he puts them into custody for 3 days, puts them into prison. Okay? He gives them time for reflection, right? In a way to kind of show them too what he has suffered. Okay? All right. On the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. I mean, that's a very interesting thing here, right? That he says, I fear God. That not the gods of, Egypt, but the true God. I mean, who would have thought that the governor, the ruler of the land of Egypt, would actually be a true believer, right? Someone who actually believes in the true God and worships him. And so, if you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. So what he's saying here is, look, this is the test. Rather than all of you being imprisoned here, I'm just going to keep one of you, and the rest are going to go back, and to verify, or to make sure that your report is true, I want you to bring back your youngest brother. Okay? Then they said to one another, in truth we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. So, what we see here, that they are contrite, right? They are being afflicted by their past sins. They know they have done wrong, and they say, yes, we deserve punishment for this, because we were cruel to our brother when we sold him into slavery, and this is why this has happened to us. And then Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. Right? That basically, he is saying, look, told you guys not to do it. Only he wasn't doing it for the right reasons. He just wanted to get in good with dear old dad. Okay? So these conversations are going on, and they think they're safe because they're speaking in Hebrew. Right? But verses 23 through 24. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. What do you do if you don't want somebody to know what you're talking about? You speak in another language, right? And so what they're doing here is that he understands exactly what they're saying, and it gives him a chance to observe to see whether they have changed or not. Verse 24, and he turned away from them and wept. Right? He's no longer able to restrain his emotions because he understood every word. Right? The fact that his brothers were contrite over what they had done touched his heart. Right? Because they were actually sorry for what they did. Right? But remember, contrition or sorrow over sins is not yet repentance. Repentance also includes faith, right? Faith in the promises of God. See, Judas was contrite, but he wasn't saved because he didn't believe. And in despair, he hanged himself, right? So they're not there yet, okay? They're getting there, but they're not there yet. And he returned to them and spoke to them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes as a way to remind them, right, to reinforce the point of what they did to him. Remember, this isn't out of vengeance. This is a way to see if they've changed. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to replace every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. So, what he did here is that he's a loving and forgiving brother. He doesn't even charge them for the grain that he's sending, right? And he wouldn't take any money from his dad that way, right? He is actually providing for them by putting their money, and he puts it in their sack because they'd get suspicious if you just, handed it over, right? Because he's taken that out of his own pocket and paying for their provisions, okay? Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money in the mouth of his sack. He said to his brothers, my money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack. At this their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? Okay? So, did Joseph mean it for a good thing? Right. Joseph meant this as for a good thing. But how do they take it?
that they would probably be stopped, that they had stolen the grain or stolen the money, that they would,
Right.
they had
that-
done something wrong.
Right, that they're getting set up, right? That they're, somebody's trying to set them up here, right? And rather than it being a good thing, they view it as a bad thing. But that's the way the guilty conscience works, right? It always takes the good things that God gives us and it turns them bad. It sours them, right? It's like if you're a thief, you're not going to trust anybody else. Why? Well, because you steal for a living, right? It's the same thing. You always impute your own sins onto other people, right? And that's the thing with a guilty conscience. There's always fear involved, okay? So rather than seeing this good thing, this forgiving thing, this way of maintaining their wealth, they can only view it as a bad thing. As if Joseph is trying to get them, okay? When they came to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, "The man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us and took us to be the spies of the land. But we said to him, we are honest men, we have never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me and take grain for the famine of your households and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me. Then I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men, and I will deliver your brother to you, and you shall trade in the land." As they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. When they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. Once again, bad consciences. And Jacob, their father, said to them, "You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me." Because this is bad, right? I mean, now it's like, well, I've lost 2 sons. Now you want to take away another, right? It seems like, because Jacob is not a young man anymore, right? He's lost the irretrievable loss of his favorite son, the uncertain fate of Simeon, and then what are they going to do if they can't go back and buy grain? Right, so this is not a good deal. Then Reuben said to his father, "Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands and I will bring him back to you." Okay, so Reuben once again is trying to, smooth things over with his father. But, he is definitely not the one that Joseph trusts, or that Jacob trusts. Because he says, "But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead. He is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. That his grief would kill him, and that Reuben would be to blame." It's a very heartrending scene. Very pathetic in the sense of pathos, of feeling, right? Because he doesn't know that his favorite son is actually alive. He doesn't know that all things are working together for good, and that a great life awaits them in Egypt, right? So, as even though we don't know everything, this is a good one to tell us to remind us that trusting in God, even when we don't understand what's going on, is paramount, right? That Jacob doesn't know what's going on, the brothers don't know what's going on, and yet God is working all these things together for their good, so that way they don't starve to death, so that way they will come out of this a very numerous and mighty people. So,
This version in the King James says corn.
yes. And that is, that's the old name for wheat.
That's just an old name for wheat.
Yeah, so for example, like in German, their name for wheat is corn with a K. And they call, what we call corn maize, which is what it originally was. So in 1600s, wheat was always known as corn. So,
Just grain.
so yeah, because corn wasn't brought over till, you know, the expeditions of the 15th century AD. So, any other questions? Well, good.
Easter Saturday or Easter morning,